Ghislaine Maxwell was just arrested in New Hampshire. She's finally seemingly being brought to justice. So I just would like to get your initial reaction on hearing the fact that she's been arrested. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the wheels of justice grind exceeding slow, and they certainly have in this case. Let's hope they also grind exceedingly fine, as they are supposed to do. It's been inexplicable that this woman has not been made to do the perp walk, has not been in handcuffs, has not been interrogated by the law, because the very clear allegations against her from a very significant number of people, possibly dozens of now women, then young girls, alleging all kinds of horrific behavior by her and also facilitating behavior by her, but not excluding actual allegations of rape against her, against children. Anyone else facing such allegations would definitely have had their collar felt by law enforcement. But better late than never. Let's hope the delay was caused by building a watertight case, and that the monstrosity of the Epstein operation, because that's what it was, can finally see the light of day in a courtroom. Something that we were robbed of course, by the untimely demise of Mr. Epstein himself in circumstances which could, most kindly be described as highly controversial.
So a lot of folks out there are saying that it's possible Ghislaine Maxwell could get off with effectively a slap on the wrist. Do you think that that is possible, and just what do you see as the likely outcome here?
Well, from what I've seen, the feds are throwing the book at her, and Andrew Neil, the grandee of the BBC, calculated today, I saw his tweet to this effect, that if found guilty on the charges, that she would spend 35 years in prison, and therefore the rest of her life in prison. So that's a long way distant from a slap on the wrist. And the closer it is eventually to a slap on the wrist, and the farthest it is from the 35 years in prison, the more suspicion will arise that the long delay in the questioning of Ms. Maxwell has not been about building a watertight case, but perhaps the opposite. The public interest in a proper trial is very considerable, because despite the excellence of the Netflix documentary, highly successful one, on the Epstein affair, we're no closer to knowing the answer to the question why. We are closer to knowing the answer to the question what happened, what did this monster do to these poor young girls. But the question of why is the one of absolutely wider public interest, because if, as I suspect, the Epstein operation was an intelligence operation, an espionage operation, an operation designed to place people vulnerable to blackmail and to extort from them in return political, strategic, economic, or any other kind of favors. The people who were circulating in the Epstein orbit, the Epstein-Ghislaine Maxwell orbit, contained some of the most powerful people in the world. Families, the family business like the Clintons, Tony Blair, his lieutenant, Peter Mandelson, Prince Andrew, the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, and many others who are involved in deeply controversial politics, all coincidentally found something interesting in the persona of Jeffrey Epstein. And we need to find out what that certain something was. Was he the spider sitting at the center of the web, catching people on the outer limits of the web around him? And if so, for what purpose? On whose behalf? At whose behest?
The last time we saw Jeffrey Epstein in West Palm Beach was September 6th of last year. He was getting off his private jet at PBIA to huddle with lawyers, fighting charges he used his mansion in Palm Beach for sexual escapades with girls under 18. Reliable sources tell us he'll report for a 1.5-year term in prison in Florida in June, then face a year probation. The fact that Epstein was allowed to travel to Israel reflects his vast business interests around the world, according to someone close to the case. But allowing someone soon to be imprisoned on felony charges to leave the country is highly irregular. That, according to investigative journalist John Connolly, who has covered the Epstein scandal from day one.
In most instances where people are facing criminal time and because a plea agreement has been made or they're under arrest for serious charges, they are forced to surrender their passport. And apparently Mr. Epstein has not been forced to do that.
The fact that the court ordered Epstein not to have contact with underage girls may indicate that Epstein will be labeled a sex offender. That is something his vast stable of high-powered attorneys have been fighting. Sources tell us that Epstein will likely report to a state prison with modern internet facilities so that he can do business from behind bars. It's been more than 3 years now since Palm Beach police started investigating Jeffrey Epstein. Reporter Connolly says money has bought him time.
I've always been a bit shocked by the way the state prosecutor has handled this case from the get-go. Historically, the police have asked for arrest warrants and been given them. In this case, because of apparently some very high-powered attorneys, they've treated Mr. Epstein much differently.
Do you think that it's likely, though, that these folks are going to be implicated in Ghislaine Maxwell's prosecution? Do you think that anything might come to light about such an intelligence operation? Because it just seems, with all of these powerful figures involved and all of these shadowy institutions involved, that that wouldn't happen.
Well, if the FBI and the justice system behaves with integrity, that will happen. If they make a deal with her to limit the scope of any trial, or perhaps obviate any trial at all in exchange for a reduced sentence, and that's what happens in most overwhelming majority of American court cases, then the public interest will not have been served. There is a great deal of public interest around the world, but more importantly, there is a great public interest in knowing the truth of what was involved in the Epstein operation.